For decades, South Africa's crime crisis has been fueled not by law-abiding citizens, but by corruption, lost police weapons, criminal infiltration of the SAPS, and a firearms registry that is so broken that it disarms gangsters instead of disarming them. In this latest call to fix firearms-related crime, I noticed an article by Dr. Stanley Maphosa that was published yesterday, 30th of October, in the Daily Maverick. And in this, he once again manages to point the finger at legal firearm owners who tend to be the most law-abiding part of the citizenry, and specifically this time at people who fall under Section 60 of the Firearms Control Act, the dedicated sport shooters and hunters. So the real question that we are asking today is, why is government forever trying to tighten laws on citizens who are already complying, while they are at the same time failing spectacularly to control its own guns, systems, police officers, and the rampant criminality that is causing everybody's headaches? I asked Gideon Joubert from SAGA, South African Gun Owners Association, to unpack this for us and to show us why he thinks blaming lawful gun owners is not only dishonest, but absolutely dangerous.
Good morning, everybody, and just a quick video to address one of the claims made by Dr. Stanley Maphosa in his Daily Maverick piece that was published last night regarding gun control problems in South Africa, or rather the extensive failure of gun control, the extensive failure of gun control legislation to stop criminals, corrupt officials and gangs and cartels from exploiting the existing system and actually just bypassing it entirely. And one of the things Dr. Maphosa mentions is closing of the so-called Section 16 loophole for unlimited firearms. Now, there is no loophole. For those of you who don't know what Section 16 is, Section 16 is a section of the Firearms Control Act that governs dedicated sport shooters and dedicated hunters. Now, what happens with dedicated sport shooters and dedicated hunters is through their participation in dedicated and sanctioned sport shooting or hunting activities through accredited associations they have to be members of. Once they have participated in a minimum amount of those activities, and they have to participate in a minimum amount of those activities annually to maintain their status and not just earn it, as well as a slight little bit of academic test writing they have to do. Once they've earned that status, the limit that applies to all other gun owners, that's Section 13 self-defense and Section 15, which is your occasional sport shooters and hunters, those are limited to a maximum of 4 firearms in total that they're allowed to own. That limit falls away for dedicated sport shooters and dedicated hunters. Now, for someone who is uninformed or dishonest, that appears to be an unlimited firearm loophole, which it isn't, because here's the deal. Every single firearm you want to license under Section 16, you have to individually motivate a need for. And if the registrar, who's in charge of the Central Firearms Registry, is not satisfied that you need that firearm, or if you have insufficiently motivated for the need, or any other reason really, the registrar retains extensive powers, he can simply refuse to issue you your license. And that is the end of it. It becomes especially tricky when you start going into restricted firearm categories like semi-auto rifles and semi-auto shotguns. The scrutiny is even more intense on those applications. And as someone that's been a dedicated sport shooter for the better part of 13 years now, I'm fairly well versed with this process, and I've had a fair number of refusals thrown my way over the course of the years. I, of course, own a number of firearms far in excess of the limited maximum 4 for non-dedicated sport shooters or gun owners. I'm, for personal security reasons, not going to tell you how many I own. I'm not going to tell you what they are. But suffice to say, I have a legitimate need for each and every one of those firearms, because also another thing Dr. Maphosa seems to forget guns are expensive. Simply stockpiling firearms for the sake of doing it is something hardly anyone can afford in this country. That also perhaps explains to some degree the expense of firearms and ammunition, why there are only really a couple of thousand dedicated sport shooters and hunters in SA. So what he is in fact doing here is he's zeroing in on a very small number of people that have the status, determining that they're a problem, that they're exploiting a loophole, and that loophole should be closed. When in fact no loophole exists, there are extensive controls already in place regarding the governance of what Section 16 license holders, or rather the Section 16 status holders, are allowed to own. And the fact that there are criminal groups exploiting the system and in any event fraudulently getting licenses, let's be clear here, okay? Mark Shaw in his various books and reports has extensively detailed how broken and corrupt the CFR is, and that there are taxi mafia groups with fake security companies that aren't even SIRA registered, that are fraudulently obtaining Section 20 business purposes firearm licenses, which is one of the hardest and most difficult license applications to get because of how much detail the applicant has to provide. If they're fraudulently printing Section 20 licenses, not fake license card, actual licenses for these groups, how do you think closing a Section 16 loophole is going to address that issue, except harm people with a legitimate need for these guns? And not just people like me, the general public as well, because let me tell you a little story about how Section 16 feeds into the bigger firearm owning ecosystem. Firstly, I'm perhaps in a slightly unique position, but not really if you look at the people in my club who shoot with me. I'm a SIRA registered security officer / security service provider, professional, whatever you want to call it, designation. I'm also a advanced / tactical level firearm instructor, registered with the Professional Firearms Trainers Council of South Africa. The only way I can familiarize myself with different weapon types, firearm types, the only way I can maintain and, or rather attain and maintain proficiency with those firearm weapon types, and the only way that I can pass on knowledge, skills, and experience, for want of a better word, to my students, is if I can have experience with a wide variety of firearms. And one of the only ways I can do that is to own and regularly use a wide variety of firearms. If I limit myself to 4 guns, I will probably still be able to be very experienced with those 4, but far less than I would otherwise be capable of doing. And that lack of experience, that lack of proficiency, and that lack of participation is going to feed into other aspects of my professional life and professional work, meaning I'll be far less competent at protecting my assets, or performing the tasking that I'm assigned, because guess what? I don't get to choose what the security firm whose books I'm on issue me, whether that's working close protection detail, whether that's working asset protection detail, it doesn't matter. So the reality is, and you don't get range time with the security company's weapons to go get yourself proficient first. That is on you. That is your responsibility. So as someone who takes the obligation and responsibility of being a lawful firearm owner in this country very seriously, removing the capability for me to own Section 16 firearms as I need them is going to have a significant negative impact, not just on my skill set, but on the skill set of my students, as well as the protection level my clients enjoy. So that's just a personal example. This is a fragile ecosystem. You don't mess with it, and you do not punish people with legitimate needs who are the law-abiding members of this public because a tiny fraction of criminals are supposedly exploiting a loophole. I'm going to end off by saying that the very idea that criminal groups are running around with Section 16 guns because a loophole exists is ridiculous. We understand the saga of the Prinsloo guns. The Prinsloo guns that were smuggled to Cape Flat gangs by corrupt police officials, and that is an ongoing problem. After gun owner groups warned Gun Free South Africa that their amnesties were a bad idea, those same amnesty guns ended up on the streets of this country back at the time. I said that Gun Free South Africa has blood on their hands, and they still do. That's the first point. The second point is we have we have credible reports and detailed reports of firearms crossing this border in large numbers, even ones that are being smuggled directly to the gangs from corrupt Namibian police officers that include full auto Uzis and AK-47s. Yet your focus is, in this grand scheme of dysfunction, corruption, violence, and misery, is not to say, hang on a second, the regulatory framework isn't working, right? It's failing miserably. Let's look for another solution. Your solution is to say, let's punish the people who willfully submit to the regulatory framework in the first place and make life hard for them, because I think there's a loophole. No, Dr. Maphosa, that's not how this is going to work. That is a ridiculous idea, and I think you need to take that one straight back to the drawing board. Thank you, and good morning.
Gideon, thank you so much for that insert. Highly appreciated, as always. To the viewers, what are your opinions on this? Let's have your comments and get your opinions on this. Why do you think they are always trying to take aim at the easiest targets here, the law-abiding citizens, the ones who are not generally causing all of these problems, instead of addressing the real problems, the real elephant in the room, the corruption, the crime? Fix the broken systems. Why do you think that is? We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this episode, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Please smash that bell icon so that you can get notifications of all our new videos. This episode will also be going live on our podcast on Spotify. It's called Quick Shots. Gideon, once again, thank you for taking the time to do this for us.